So what are the global challenges that we face in cities today? That is what I will start talking about. I will talk about how nature-based solutions can address some of these challenges, and I will look at demographic, environmental, and economic challenges that cities face. So if we look at climate change, it's one of the main drivers for ecosystem degradation, resource loss, affecting the ability of nature to provide solutions to the challenges that society face. Climate change is an overarching, cross-cutting challenge, so it really calls for cross-disciplinary collaboration between natural scientists, economists, social scientists, and in my team, people come from various backgrounds. It also requires different sectorial actors to collaborate in order to achieve the goals and challenges that our societies have set within climate resilience, climate goals, etc. So if we go straight into the demographic challenges, by 2050, the global population will have grown by 3 billion people. 3 billion people will have moved into cities. Today, 1 billion people live in slums. By 2050, 3 billion people will be living in slums. Now, that's very relevant for cities. It's also very relevant for climate resilience, nature-based solutions. Cities, as I will address later on, cities are, climate change hit harder on cities because of population density. And obviously, if we're talking slums, there are not basic infrastructures, etc., to overcome severe climate disruptions. So in 2015, 600 million people relocated. It's the largest relocation since World War II. At the same time, we see that 40 million people will leave the workforce in Europe by 2030. By 2030, 325 million people will move into the workforce in Africa. By 2050, Sub-Saharan Africa accounts for more than 50% of the world's working age population growth. So we see that demographic shifts are incurred by continued migration, and a lot of the migration is going into cities. And a lot of the migration is going into cities in the developed world. So if we look at the economic challenges, I believe it's disputed, of course, but I personally believe that there is a conveyance of living standards. I believe that we will see, as people shift from rural areas to cities, as people shift from the developing world to the developed world, that we will see some kind of conveyance in living standards. That should be coupled with the fact that in 2015, extreme poverty fell below 10% for the first time in human history. This means that we have a lot of people shifting into the middle classes. And with a shift into the middle class comes a new demand for resources as we have accelerated consumption. So with a 2% global GDP growth rate, which is very modest. Within the next 80 years, we will have depleted 80% of our natural resources. Now, obviously, from an economist perspective, that is a huge opportunity because you can go out and find substitute, there will be new business opportunities, etc. Also, a lot of it is in recycling and circular economy and so on. But it is also an immense threat. I mean, if we look at the building industry, we know that it has to change radically within the next decades because of resource scarcity. So the continued demand for natural resources is one of the biggest threats that we see today. So if we look at rising sea levels, that a lot of people will say you have a continued demand for resources, you have that leads to climate change, climate disruptions, and you have an increase in rising sea levels. Now this is the short story from an economist. I'm sure I'm doing shame to this, and my colleagues from natural science will give a much better explanation to this chain of events. But 30 out of the 50 biggest cities are located in coastal areas. 360 million people live in what we call low elevation coastal areas that are maximum 10 meters above sea levels. 200 million people live just maximum 1 meter above sea level. And by the end of the 21st century, we believe that sea levels will rise to almost 1 meter, and this will displace millions, obviously. At the same time, you have rising seawater and climate disruptions like this Hurricane Sandy in New York that goes in and contaminates drinking water, the sewer systems, etc. Only 2.5% of all water in the world is fresh drinking water, and currently 20% of urban drinking water is contaminated, while 40% of all surface water is polluted. So if we look at from a European perspective, with rising sea levels, if we're talking about rising temperatures by 2.5 degrees, the rising sea levels will have a cost of 20 billion euros. If we're talking 5.4 degrees, it will be 65 billion euros, and that's just the European economy. So yeah, I'm not. I sound as if I'm a pessimist. I'm actually not. I'm quite positive and have great faith in our capacity to overcome all these challenges. But I think it's very important that we share that we get a good understanding of what are we standing in front of, what is the beast that we are confronting, right? So at the same time, we see that currently 3.2 million people die prematurely each year due to air pollution. A much more closer to the ground example is fracking in Oklahoma, where the number of earthquakes has increased by 50% from 2014 to 16. At the same time, we see that fossil fuels are subsidized by $14.5 billion per day. So what is happening is that we are in an economic paradigm where economic growth has to occur at all cost, because that is how we create jobs, that's how we're measured. But we have to think of the larger ramifications of pursuing such strategies. I know if you're a politician, you can't really say anything else, but let's grow the economy and let's get more jobs. But, I think as a collective society, we should start thinking of, when people pursue individual interest of harvesting benefits, economic benefits from natural resource extraction, and it inflicts massive public health costs, such as people going into hospitals because of air pollution, or people losing their houses because of earthquakes and so on. I mean, there is some complete distortion in the fact that it's society that has to pay the cost, while it's individual companies and individuals that harvest the benefits. It's individuals that harvest the benefits of extracting rare metals, but it's society at large, global society, that will have to live with the consequences in the form of climate change and resource depletion. So there is some kind of mismatch between protecting individual interests and the right to earn money, and then the damage that you do on society as a whole. So that's a discussion that one can continue investigating into. It certainly doesn't get you any brownie points in terms of becoming popular by saying stuff like this, that's for sure.
We've got to say it.
Yeah.
To say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I totally agree, and I am saying it, but I also get into lots of trouble saying it. So in 2009, 325 natural disasters were climate related out of a total of 351. Almost 140 million people were affected by climate-related natural disasters in 2009. And by 2050, 2 million people will relocate annually due to climate-related natural disasters. In the EU, between 2002 and 2012, climate disruptions generated 80,000 fatalities, and it cost 95 billion euros in economic losses. So just to wrap up this session or this section, let's look at the cause and reactions. So we're becoming more people on planet Earth, and more people are moving into the middle classes, and they are adapting middle class habits of consumption. They all want cars and dishwashers, and they all want to eat meat and etc. And so at the same time, more people are moving into cities. Population density makes us more vulnerable to climate disruptions. And our current level of consumption is unsustainable given the limitation of our environment and resources. So high consumption leads to resource depletion, leads to environmental impact, and it accelerates climate change. Climate disruptions hit harder in cities because of the high population density, concrete cast, and outdated infrastructures of our developed world cities. And we have an urgent task in developing sustainable cities in the developing world. Right. So if we say there are 5 challenges that most cities face, these are growth and demographic change challenges, infrastructure challenges. In the developed world cities, infrastructure needs updating. It's often obsolete. And in the developing world, it's non-existent in some places. We have environmental and social challenges, governance deficits and challenges, and financial challenges. So we need to think in new sustainability solutions for cities, right? So why nature-based solutions? Nature-based solutions solve multiple problems simultaneously. They solve recreational and flooding, drought, health and greening, infrastructure and parks. And when tech and engineered solutions fail, they fail big time, right? We think of soil erosion. If you have in some places, an engineered solution would be to build a drainage or a wall, but if you both have the soil erosion and the wall coming down, it's more massive than if you just have the soil coming down. But there are nature-based solutions. You would plant trees and then you would avoid both, basically. So you have dam leakage, you have flooding that will go into the sewer system and pollute the water, and you have cement deserts and urban droughts. So I'm going to present to you some examples. I have 6 examples. Do I have time for that?
7 minutes left.
Okay, so I don't have time for that. So in Bucharest, the government, the communist government, they seized a lot of properties and land because they wanted to make a huge hydrological project. But it was abandoned with the revolution in '89. So this CEO of a manufacturing company, he decided that he would, the area was taken over by squatters, roamers, and it was used as a land field for the urban citizens. So he decided that he would create a park. So what he did was that he used basically the media and a lot of social media to gather the forces of the community. And what he said was that his main goal was to become as famous as possible within the shortest time possible. And it was also to create the park before it was created. So they had a lot of billboards that showed how it would look, etc. So it became the first nature park created by citizens in Romania rather than the government. And it increased the green areas in Bucharest by 1 square meter per citizens. Now, if we go to North Harbour, this is at least closer to my home. We have people moving into the city, about 10 to 12,000 new citizens per year, and this puts a massive demand on land for development, residential and commercial properties. So we have created this company that is a privately run, publicly owned government. It's owned by the city and the national government. It's called Copenhagen City and Harbour Development Corporation. So what we did was that they put in the North Harbour, which was a deindustrialized harbour that they're redeveloping, they put a concrete cast into the water, and they are using the redevelopment to fund the whole metro construction that goes across all of Copenhagen, and it is done entirely with the revenue from this company. It is not. There's no rising of taxpayers' money. So they are saying to the metro construction company, which is a private company, and others that are building, that they can unload clean soil into the cast that goes into the ocean, and they get 6.5 euros per ton. Now, so far they have earned 130 million euros filling the hole. And they have made it climate resilient. It's 1 meter above sea ocean, right? Which has just given them extra source of income. So now I'm just going to...
that was 10 minutes, so you've got 10 minutes to go.
I got 10 minutes to go.
It's gone up, so yeah.
It's gone up.
It's gone up, it's amazing.
Okay.
Due to climate change.
Climate change.
Okay, so what we have here is Manchester, And they have made a series of urban parks that has reduced daytime temperatures by 1 degree. By 2080, if they don't introduce any more green areas in urban parks, temperatures will increase by 4.3 degrees Celsius. If they increase green areas by 10%, they will bring down urban temperatures to below the 1961 baseline. So I think this is very important. It's a very easy way to have a lot of impact. So if we look in Netherlands, what they did was they did flood protection of 4 million people by restoring the natural wetlands and rivers going into the city. So in the surrounding area around the city. And it lowered the water levels by 30 to 60 centimeters. It increased the wetland habitats and biodiversity, and it improved the drinking water quality, the water quality in general for the city, and it's used as a massive carbon storage. If we look at Stuttgart, so green roofs are mandatory in new urban development plans. This has reduced the need for air conditioning in summer by 75%. It has reduced smog, reduced urban heat island effects, and increased biodiversity. So a lot of these solutions are low-tech, they're fairly cheap, and they have massive impact. So this is the last example. It's the policy, the Energiewende. I think it was introduced in Germany in 2015, and it predicts that 80% of energy should come from renewable sources by 2050. So now comes the interesting bit. They estimate that 76% of that transition will come from individuals installing solar panels. So local governments, they can incentivize communities, like with the park in Bucharest. They can use the resources of the citizens to change and to implement, to deliver new solutions. And there are numerous examples of this. Also in Germany, I know that they have in some areas, they are letting the property owners own the streets. And so if, for instance, if they want to improve the streets, this is especially in commercial areas where you want to have a nicer pedestrian area, then you do so with your own funds. So there are different ways of reallocating responsibilities that are interesting that one should look into. So this is my wrap up, and I think I'm within time, except if it has increased.
No, you've gone down to 3 minutes.
Now I'm down to 3, okay. Nature-based solutions regenerate rather than deplete scarce natural resources. So this is the whole idea of circular economy that the European Union, European Commission is very involved in at the moment. They are easily adaptable to the environment and climate, and therefore they're more climate resilient. They help cities achieve their goals and CO2 emission reductions. They're low tech and cheaper than grey techie solutions, and they invite citizens to collaborate and co-create. They increase biodiversity, reduce city temperatures, improve human welfare, and make cities more attractive places for people to live in. And they increase the market potential and revenue of properties and the cities as a whole. So that's all from me, and I think that there's time for questions, right?
Yeah.